Howdy everyone, my name's Chris and let's get straight into testing out the Viltrox AF 35mm f1.8 FE. It was only for Nikon Z-mount cameras and now it's made its way onto Sony E-mount too. It's a full frame lens that costs $400 in the US or about £350 in the UK, and I wanted to test out this Sony version to see how well it works on E-mount and to see how well it works on an aps-c camera too. I'd like to say a big thank you to Viltrox for providing this lens for testing, although as usual this is a totally independent review. It is so easy to shoot with a 35mm lens, no matter what camera system you're using. That moderately wide angle of view on a full frame camera lends itself to all kinds of different everyday photographs. And of course, that bright aperture of f1.8 ensures you can get subject photography with a little depth and shoot more easily indoors or in the dark. Well, let's start by taking a look at the lens's build quality, and anyone who has handled a Viltrox lens before will be very familiar with how it feels and works. The lens barrel is solid and metallic, feeling pretty tough with a nice brushed finish to it. The lens mount is also made of metal, as you can see, and although there's no weather sealing gasket here, there is a USB-C port for future firmware updates, and Viltrox tend to keep their lenses updated. Next, there comes a metallic aperture ring which turns around without clicks except to get into auto mode. It turns with just enough resistance to stop you accidentally changing aperture. I'd prefer a mechanism with clicks myself, really, although the smooth aperture change looks nice when shooting video, which can be helpful for some users. The lens has a metallic focus ring which turns extremely smoothly and a little firmly. A good point for video makers is that the lens doesn't really display much focus breathing, as you can see here, but you do see a fair bit of warping in the corners of the image, which can be a little distracting. The autofocus motor works silently and at an average speed, and there were no accuracy issues either in my tests. People in the comments go crazy if I don't mention this, but yes, the focus motor works a little faster when shooting in autofocus continuous mode, which is normal for many Sony cameras. The lens's filter size is a fairly small 55mm wide, and it comes with a decently sized plastic hood. The hood can be reverse mounted onto the lens, but only with a little difficulty. The fitting is a bit tight. The lens does not feature image stabilization. Overall, in terms of build quality, it's a nice enough little package. It's small and tough, works perfectly well, and could be quite useful for video work. Now, let's move on and look at image quality. I will start by testing it on a 42MP Sony A7R III with its full frame sensor. In-camera corrections are turned on. In the middle of the image, straight from f1.8, sharpness is just okay, contrast a little low. Image quality in the corners is softer, albeit not disastrous, but contrast there seems a little better. Stop down to f2.8 and those corners now look very sharp with just an edge of colour fringing here. Image quality back in the middle is excellent. Stop down to f4 for a touch of extra contrast in the middle, and the corners continue to look very nice. f5.6 and f8 look even sharper. The image begins to get noticeably softer at f16, where the effects of diffraction begin to kick in. Overall, I was left a bit disappointed by the lens's performance at f1.8, although it is usable there. Image quality takes off nicely when you stop the aperture down a bit, though. Let's test it out on an aps-c camera now, my little 24MP Sony A5100. In the middle of the image at f2.8, the contrast is looking pretty ghostly, but good detail is still being captured. Corner image quality is really very soft. That's a surprise, considering that it was okay on full frame. We must be dealing with a bit of a curved plane of focus here. Anyway, f2.8 looks slightly clearer in the corners, and the middle looks fantastic now, a huge improvement. f4 is perfect in the middle, and the corners, well, still really quite bad. You need to stop down to f8 for usable image quality in those corners, and all the way down to f11 for good sharpness there. So that's a bit of a weird anomaly. My Sony A5100 seemed to 100% not appreciate this lens at all, so it's probably best kept for full frame shooters. Let's move on and look at distortion and vignetting. Here is what you get if you leave in-camera corrections turned off. We are treated to some notable pin-cushion distortion in your images here, and plenty of corner darkness. Stop down to f2.8 or f4 for those image corners to brighten up. Now, let's take a look at close-up image quality. The lens can focus down to about 40 centimeters, not very close to your subject. Image quality deteriorates close up with softness, lower contrast, and some magenta color fringing. Stop down to f2.8 and image quality quickly becomes sharp again. Now, let's see how the lens works against bright lights. It's a slightly below average performance here. A fair bit of large pattern flaring is visible, but it's fairly translucent. But more worrying is the glaring when bright lights are in the edges of your image. While we're working in the dark, let's take a look at chroma levels. At f1.8, bright lights in the corner of your images show a moderate amount of smearing here. At f2.8 and f4 though, it goes away quickly. Let's zoom out a bit and look for some sun stars. They begin to emerge at f8, as you can see here, but if you stop all the way down to f11 or f16, they get nice and wild. Finally, let's take a look at this lens's bokeh. Its autofocus backgrounds are on the smooth side of average here. I checked my test pictures carefully, and there are never any seriously distracting problems. And related to bokeh comes longitudinal chromatic aberration. It is very strong at f1.8. It remains down to f2.8, but stop down to f4 or f5.6 and it's gone. Overall, the Viltrox AF 35mm f1.8 FE is a relatively low-budget lens, and unsurprisingly, optical compromises have been made. It's not amazingly sharp at its widest aperture, and its contrast levels and chromatic aberration aren't great either. Strangely, the Nikon Z version of the lens I tested seemed to be slightly sharper. Don't ask me why. However, the lens's nice build quality and autofocus are all helpful. It's a somewhat average offering overall here though. Well, thanks for watching all you Viltrox fans out there and everyone else. If you have found this review helpful and you'd like to support this channel, then do check out my Patreon page in the description below, where supporters can find all kinds of fun, exclusive content. Ciao for now.